Okay, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mangg. Welcome back to Roll Mangging for our Call of Cthulhu campaign. So kind of a crazy session, really out there. There were some big reveals, some big events happened. In fact, I didn't even keep any notes from today's session, so I'm going to have to do this all from memory, which is probably not great, but I think I know all the big stuff that happened, so... Alright. This Roll Mangging is a combination of today's big session and a Thursday night mini-session, because we missed last week. So on Thursday, we didn't have Ed, and we didn't have Charlie Chalk. And so Alfred, Reginald... Oh, actually, okay, I think I mentioned this in Secrets of Roll Mangging. I did not mention this in Roll Mangging. But there was a big fire at the Hemsworth mansion. Catastrophic fire, burned the whole place down, and killed Alfred's wife and child, his butler, killed Ulysses, and killed Mafume. It's terrible. And so the next morning... Alfred finds out, he gets a phone call about this big fire. So he goes to the ruins of his mansion, and the bodies had all been taken away. And he tried to search around for any kind of memento or anything, but he couldn't find anything, and so he kind of just left in despair. And so then Olaf and Reefly brought in two new characters. Olaf's new character was Edgar Jameson, who was kind of a military doctor, and Reefly's new character is named Shin Katsu, who was part of the Yakuza, and he had a katana. Yeah, these types of characters don't tend to survive for very long. And so he was in... Edgar was in London because Jonah had sent him to speak to Reginald and join the investigation. Shinkatsu was in London to kill Edgar Jameson for whatever reason. And, yeah, so it all kind of went down at the Reginald Hall. And so Edgar went in there to speak to Reginald. And Shinkatsu stayed outside in, like, the alley across the street to just kind of look in. And so he's just kind of waiting out there. And suddenly he hears a voice from behind that says, "Hi!" And so he turns and he sees Gulk there. And so Gulk just is like, "Oh, I see. You're looking at Steinway Hall. You know, I know Mr. Steinway himself. I could introduce you." And so... Edgar and Reginald are in there kind of doing introductions, and Reginald is telling them about their investigation so far. And so then Shinkatsu comes in with his katana strapped to his back, and everybody kind of freaks out because there's this Asian man standing there with a katana on him. He had it sheathed, of course, but still. Everybody freaked out. And Reginald calms everything down and pulls Shinkatsu in his office and sees Edgar there. And so he pulls his katana on Edgar, and Reginald pulls out his gun. It's this big deal, and Gulk's just like, "Wow!" And so Edgar eventually gave him like £200 in British cash so he wouldn't kill him. They bought him off. And then Shinkatsu joined the investigation because Gulk gave him a bunch of money and promised to give him more money if he came along on the investigation. Yeah, it was kind of weird. And so at that point, they had both joined the investigation. Let's see here. I think at that point Alfred came in. It was introduced to the two. And he was kind of morose because, you know, his wife and child had just burned horribly in a fire. And, let's see here. So they discussed their options. And the main option was, their plan was to go out to Lesser Dale, to Derbyshire, to investigate these monstrous killings out there. So they're like, okay, we could go out there. But the other lead that they had was the Penhew Foundation. Because Sir Aubrey Penhew was on the Carlisle expedition. They knew some little information about the Penhew Foundation, so they wanted to drop by and kind of check out the place, maybe get some questions answered. So they all head down to the Penhew Foundation, which is this nice, very nice, high Victorian style, very well constructed, classy place, and two-story building. So they go in there, and they go into the exhibit hall, which has, it's like the largest private Egyptian collection in England at least. Probably a bigger area than that. And so they scope through all that. They're looking for like inverted ankhs and said, "This is cult shit. Please look at this." You know, that's what they're looking for. But they don't. It's just Egyptian stuff, you know. And they're like, "Oh, okay." And so eventually they go back down and they go to speak to the head of the Penhew Foundation, which is Edward Gavigan. And so they sit in his waiting room, and there's just, you know, Egyptian shit all over the place. And Alfred takes out his knife and starts carving into the table in the waiting room, and he carves an inverted ankh. And they go in and they speak with Edward, who's a very upstanding British gentleman. You know, he's been kind of ragged to riches story, and he's very well groomed and a modern British gentleman. And so Reginald, I think, does most of the talking. And so they ask him a number of questions. It's hard to get specifics down, but they ask him. They mentioned Jackson Elias at one point, and Edward said that, you know, Gavigan said that he had spoken with Jackson when he was in London, and he had told him some information that he knew about the Carlisle expedition, what happened to them, and basically that this mysterious African woman had contacted Roger Carlyle, and, you know, some stuff went on with them, and she had information about kind of a shadowy period in Egyptian history that Sir Aubrey Penhew was very interested in. And so he signed on for the expedition to kind of investigate this new information that this woman had. But then it turned out to be a hoax, and so she ran off with all the expedition's funds, and it kind of just derailed from there. And they went then to Nairobi to kind of take a bit of almost a break. And that's where disaster struck for them. And so most of the records of the expedition that Sir Aubrey was keeping track of kind of disappeared. And so they, I think, asked if he had sent any letters back or something like that. And he definitely did, but it contained a lot of personal information about members of the expedition. You know, it wasn't like records of their finds and stuff like that. It was more just personal letters back to Sir Gavigan, because they were kind of close friends. And so he would rather not give those to, you know, outsiders. So they kind of got hung up on these letters, and he just wasn't going to give to them. And eventually he was like, well, I can show you some of the artifacts that the Carlisle expedition uncovered. Because they did uncover stuff in Egypt, not pertaining to that certain period of history that Sir Aubrey was interested in, but they found other stuff. And they said, sure. So he takes them through kind of they're still cataloging all this stuff. This still, you know, to this day, they're cataloging this stuff. Because it's kind of, you have to fight tooth and nail, I guess, to get this shit out of Egypt, away from the Egyptian government. Apparently they're very protective of their culture. You know, they'd rather have Egyptian stuff stay in Egypt rather than some private collection in London. I can understand. And so So he goes through and he talks about all the stuff that they found, and he talks to them for like 2 hours, and it's incredibly dull and bored. They're all bored out of their skulls because it's nothing interesting. It's all just boring Egyptian shit, and none of them know anything about Egyptology or archaeology, so they don't know shit about what he's talking about. And he's not the best speaker, you know. He's kind of a boring guy in general, so he's just kind of drolling on about this. And so eventually they're just like, well, thank you for your time, Mr. Cap. Yeah, you know. So they get out of there. And they talk for a bit outside about, you know, those letters would be pretty useful, you know. That would be some real good information. But eventually they're just like, all right, well, let's head out to Lesser Adale. So they get on the train to Derbyshire. And to Derby. And on the train, I think Reginald starts playing rock, paper, scissors with Gulk. And he discovers that Gulk wins every single time. Without fail. It's kind of strange. And he's like, alright, Gulk, we're gonna write down our responses, you know, our decisions for 20 rock, paper, scissors matches. So we're just going to go down a list on a piece of paper and write down what we throw for 20 of them. He's like, okay. And so all Reginald writes down is 20 times of rock. And so, of course, on Gulk's piece of paper, it's 20 papers. And so Gulk's just like, I'm really lucky. And so I think Alfred was like, okay, Gulk, I'm going to throw rock on this rock, paper. I'm going to throw rock, all right? And he throws, like, I think he threw scissors. And so Gulk threw rock. Of course, he's got to win. And so Gulk's like, aha, I bested you, Mr. Hemsworth. See, because if you rolled rock, it was a tie. But if you cheated and lied, then I had a 50-50. He's right. You know, that's what I would do. And so they were just kind of like, whatever. They kind of gave up on that. And so they arrive in Derby. They get a hired car out to Lesser Adale. They arrive in this little quaint village. Very picturesque, man. I imagine this place is real beautiful. And it's just a little village. It's got like 30 little houses. It's got a pub, a bed and breakfast, a little church, like a mercantile store. And up on a stone bluff nearby is big Victorian Castle Plum. I guess it wouldn't be Victorian, would it? I don't know what kind of castle it is. Like I said, I don't know where I mentioned that. You use Victorian to describe anything, and it's just like, oh, Victorian! Right on! Yes, Victorian castle. Alright. And so they get dropped off in front of the pub. And so they're like, okay, I guess we'll go in the pub. So they go in there. It's a very friendly, rowdy place, you know, because what else is there to do in Lesser Adale and drink in the pub? And so they sit down there, they start drinking, and they ask the bartender. One of them asks the bartender about a guy named Harold Short, who was the only surviving person of the attacks from this horrible creature. And so the place kind of quiets down a little bit, but he's like, oh, yeah. Harold's, I think he's recovering in some other place. It was like hours away from here. As in, he's not really a person to get information from. He's probably pretty traumatized as it is. And so they sit down, they're drinking, and in comes the constable, the local constable, Tumwell. And so they call him over, and they start talking to Tumwell. And he's like, oh, yes, I shot a wild dog with old Bessie here, so I took care of it. And none of the villagers really believe him. They think he's a joke. And so they're kind of coming to terms with this, that maybe this guy isn't for real. And eventually an older drunk crazy guy in the corner speaks up. And he's got one of those voices. He's basically like the Dark Corners of the Earth Innsmouth guys. So, I seen him, man, I seen him! Which really rapes my vocal cords, but I had to keep it up because it was funny as hell. And so they spoke with this old crazy guy who says that he saw a man dog or a dog man out there, and it comes for your children in the night and stuff like that. And so they asked him if they could. He said he saw the creature a week ago near the woods, and so they asked him if he would lead them out to where they saw him. And so he agreed they would come back in an hour and go for it. And so they're going to go. They ask the bartender where they can stay in town, and there's the bed and breakfast. So they start heading out of the pub, and they bump into a gentleman that recognizes Alfred. He's like, Alfred Emsworth, what are you doing here? And this is Sir Henry Van Pelt, who's a fellow big game hunter that Alfred knows. And unlike Alfred, this guy is a bit of a sadist. Or so Alfred has heard the rumors. Where if he's bored on a hunt, he may let loose some African natives to shoot, and maybe, you know, after he shoots them, he may barbecue them, you know, stuff like that. He's not a good guy, so Alfred hates the guy. And so there's some gentle ribbings going on between the two, and of course Van Pelt heard about the monster, so he's out here to bag it, and put it on his wall, and you know what they do. And so they head to the bed and breakfast, they get their rooms, and they head back. So they have Shin Katsu there, and they're like, alright Shin, we want you to watch this guy. You know, just stay outside the pub, and just sit there and watch where this guy goes, this Van Pelt guy. They're very intrigued by him, because he apparently knows something. And so like an hour goes by, he doesn't see him come out of the pub. So they all head back to the pub to meet, you know, their buddy. And they see Van Pelt sitting there with his arm over the guy's shoulder and chatting him up, and he's bought him drinks and stuff. Like, oh yeah, well I'm just talking to my pal Cliff here. But yeah, if you need him, go ahead. And so they take Cliff and they take outside, and he's gonna lead him to where he saw the creature. So they head outside of the village. After about 5 minutes or so, Shin sees Van Pelt leave the pub and head in the same direction. So Shin starts following Van Pelt. And Cliff leads the others out of the village near the tree line. He says, "That's where I saw him." And he's like, "I've done my job." And he starts running back. And so Van Pelt bumps into Cliff while he's running back. And so Van Pelt starts talking in a low voice to this Cliff guy. And so Shin's like, "I want to sneak up and hear the conversation." And of course he bungles all of his sneak rolls everywhere all the time. And so he lets Van Pelt finishes speaking with Cliff. Cliff scampers off, and then Van Pelt just looks right at Shin. And so the gig is up, and he's like, I don't like being followed by a Chinaman, much less, you know, or I don't like being followed by any man, much less a Chinaman. You know, he says something like that. And Shin says a few intimidating words that don't really work. And he's like, well, I guess we're done here. And so Shin starts to walk away. And that's when Van Pelt busts out his whip and lashes it right around his neck and like yanks him back over. And so then they start fighting. It involves a couple swings from his katana and Van Pelt trying to blast him with his revolver. And it ends with Shinkatsu decapitating Van Pelt in the middle of a village road. Yeah, he decapitated him. Oh boy. And so the group hears the gunshot, and they run over, and they see Shinkatsu with the bloody katana standing over Van Pelt's decapitated corpse. And they're like, damn. And so they're like, oh shit, man, oh shit. And so Constable Tumwell runs over, and they can see eyes from all over, looking at him now, and they're like, oh God, it was self-defense. And he's like, did you witness this? And they all lied. Like, yes, we witnessed. He was self-defense. And so Constable Tumwell he's really shitty at his job, and he's really dumb. But he likes his job, and he wants to keep it. So he pulls a couple of them in close, and he's like, I've had enough trouble with this whole creature on the loose thing, and I don't need another investigation here from the big city, so you think it's alright if we just keep this under wraps? I'll take care of the body. Let's just not talk about it. And they're like, yes, please. And so he basically just tosses the body in the woods and buries it under some leaves or something. They're like, alright. And so that was the end of Sir Henry Van Pelt, the sadistic big game hunter. He lived a glorious life. But he messed with Shinkatsu, man. Alright, and so they all head back to the bed and breakfast pretty much, because they didn't think they were going to resolve much that night. And Alfred has a nightmare that night, where he is standing on the road leading up to his mansion, and his mansion is in a blazing fire, and he is paralyzed and cannot move to go help. And he hears his family screaming in pain and agony from inside. And he looks over to the side of the mansion, and he sees a man holding a gas canister. And he looks real close, as hard as he can, to see the man's face. And the man turns and gazes at him. And the man is Charlie Chuck. Oh, and that's where we ended the Thursday session. Okay. Between the Thursday session and the Sunday session, Olaf decided to drop out of the campaign. Did not want to play anymore at all. Partly because he said that he couldn't come up with a character that interested him enough in this setting, or he couldn't really enjoy himself in this setting, and partly because I think he wanted to watch Secrets Role Mangging. So he's out. He's done. We're down to 5 players, which means we do need a 6th player. The problem is, most of the people I think that watch Role Mangging also watch Secrets of Role Mangging. And if you watched any Secrets of Role Mangging, you cannot take part in the campaign at all. So I'll put this out there, that if you have only watched Role Mangging and none of the Secrets stuff, and you want to play with us, I'll allow it. But if you watch any Secrets of Role Mangging, you can't do it, because you've seen too much. So yeah, I don't know if there's anybody out there that fits those requirements. It's kind of strict, I know, but I'll just put it out there because we do need a 6th now. Yeah. So anyway, Olaf dropped out. That was unfortunate. So we come back in. His character, that Edgar, just wandered off at night into the woods, and some creature killed him. No remains will ever be found. He's gone. Alright, so then we go to today's session. And we have the whole crew here, minus Olaf, of course. And so Von Lyons and Charlie Chuck wake up in the safe house. And they had gone to bed because they both of them missed the Thursday session, which took place basically entirely on February 9th. The whole session was just that one day. And so they wake up, to keep continuity right, they wake up on the 10th. They did nothing on the 9th. And so they basically just slept through a whole day. Now, were they just really tired, or did something happen? Or they assume they slept through the 9th. Bottom line is, they don't remember the 9th at all, so they must have slept through it, right? Anyways. So they wake up, they see the paper about the Hemsworth Mansion, because that's still the big story going around, and they call up Steinway Hall, and they get a message that the group had gone to Lesser Adale on an investigation. And so the two of them discuss this, and they decide that, okay, well, we're gonna head out to Lesserdale. We gotta join up with them. But first, maybe we should check out this Penhew Foundation thing. Like, all right, we'll go stop by the Penhew Foundation. Which is funny because neither of them knew that the other group had gone to the Penhew Foundation. Like, the players didn't know. Nobody told them that they had gone to the Penhew Foundation already. So it was kind of like, oh yeah. So they head out to the Penhew Foundation. They get there too early to view the private Egyptian collection, but they get their interview with Gavigan. Most of the same points came up, but the letters did not come up in this conversation. But Charlie uncovered a different piece of information in two successful spot hiddens, I think. He notices, one, that there's a safe in the office, and two, on the northern wall of the office, there appears to be like a wall paneling that doesn't sit quite as right among the other ones. Oh. And so that's pretty much what they uncovered. And so then they head out to Derbyshire. Von Lyons thinks that he's being followed by somebody, but they didn't really confirm this or not. And they get out to Lesserdale just as the other group is stepping out of the bed and breakfast after breakfast. And Ziggy was late to the session today, so his character was still a little ill in bed. And so they all meet up and they're like, hey, we're heading up to this Castle Plum to interview the Vanes, to talk to the Vanes about these killings that's going on. They're like, all right, let's go. So they all head up there, minus Reginald. And they get up there, they knock on the big doors a couple times. They use the big knockers, and they kind of make an ass of themselves because you don't, like, if they had asked any villager, they would have told them, or like if they had asked, if they had asked anybody, they'd be like, no, the big doors apparently don't open anymore, so they use the side door. And so now they just look like dumb foreigners or something, dumb Americans, even though we have one Japanese guy, two British guys, Golk, and an American. Yeah, it's a weird group. Anyways, so after a couple knocks, the side door opens up and the butler says, hello. And so he leads them into the library of Castle Plum. Nice big library. And in walks, he sends in Sir Arthur Vane, the patriarch of the family. And so they question him about these killings and stuff, and basically tells them that the village is filled with, rumors, and, we pretty much keep to ourselves, and we don't really know anything about what's going on out there, and blah, blah, blah. And they don't really get much information. They fail some credit ratings, they fail some persuades, they don't do a great job. They really needed Reginald there, because his persuade is awesome, and his credit rating is even better. I imagine they would have found something out with Reginald there, but them's the breaks. And so eventually they ask about his other people living at the Castle Plum, and so they find out that he has a son and a daughter. And so the son is 23, daughter's 21, and so they want to speak with him. So he goes off, and he's like, the son will speak, that's no problem, but he doesn't think the daughter would have any interest in speaking with you, but they really pressure. They're like, please, just ask her, And so they're like, oh, fine. And so he leaves, and they search the library for any interesting books about the occult or anything like that. The only thing they find is a book about 16th century witch cults. And so they have Shin steal the book. Oh, this is interesting. Steal it! Okay. And so then in comes Lawrence Vane, the son. They ask him pretty much the same questions. He reveals that his mother, the mother of the family died 7 years ago, and Sir Arthur Vane hasn't really left the castle since then. He's been kind of a shut-in. And he acknowledged that most of the rumors in the village are about him, because these attacks started recently after he returned from Oxford, and so he dismisses most of them. They failed psychology, or they failed all sorts of roles to find anything out here. It was kind of terrible. I'm not sure if they succeeded on any role in Castle Plum. And so Von Lyons started really pressuring him about, how did your mother die? Tell us how your mother died! It was pretty terrible, and so he asked them to pretty much, this is over. And so the daughter never came down to talk to them, and they left. And that was pretty much it. So they get down, they go back to the bed and breakfast, they see Reginald there, they talk with Reginald about what they found out, what to do. They give him the book on the witch cult, so Reginald starts reading that. Von Lyons and Alfred go, and they want to go around town and find some more information. So they go find Constable Tumwell at his house. They talk to him, they said the Vanes didn't really say much, they were kind of closed up about it. And they asked Constable Tumwell about what happened to the mother, and so they find they found a lot of kind of shady information that there was no real funeral or anything. Like the Vanes apparently keep to themselves quite a bit. Like they handle everything on their own in Castle Plum, I guess. And so he's not really sure how the mother died. They said natural causes, but they didn't alert the authorities for the the death, and they apparently handled it all on their own. So I don't know. I don't know how the jurisdiction works between does the Constable Tumwell, is he in charge of Castle Plum as well? I don't know. I guess he would go there to assist, but maybe they're independent. I don't know. And yeah, so he was not much help. But he's like, well, I guess if anybody might know what happened, you might want to talk to the local vicar of the church. He's been here for like 30 years. And so they go, like that's just basically, here's a lead. And so they go talk to the vicar, the reverend. And they go in there and question him. And he's a nice enough guy. And they question him a bunch. And they fail a bunch of roles again. Like, they were just... Oh, man, it was terrible. And I can't just give them... Like, if you don't have characters doing things that are... Like, you need a certain skill set to get information out of people. The polite way. Anybody, I guess, can... Not anybody, but most people can just put a gun to somebody's face and have them give them information. But if you don't want to run things like that, then you're in a bit of tougher luck. And so they failed their persuades and all that, and so they got minimal information out of the Reverend. He doesn't know how the mother died, or at least he wouldn't say. And he's just like, the Vanes keep it themselves. I don't know. They don't attend Mass, so what are you going to do? And so they pretty much thanked him and headed on their way, but they knew he was kind of hiding something. So they headed back to the bed and breakfast. And the others had kind of discussed this whole, what are we really doing here? Why are we here? Why are we continuing this investigation? How does this help us? Because, yes, would be great to solve this, supposed murder mystery, assuming there's still one going on, but we're here. They're there for they're around here for a bigger purpose. They're supposed to be looking into the Carlisle expedition, these big cults, and this big thing that's going on, this apparent big ordeal that they need to solve. And so, how does this fit in? That's what they were questioning. They couldn't really come up with a concrete answer. keep in mind, the only reason that they're there is because of an article that Jackson Elias looked at from a tabloid. So you got to think about it. And so they were like, all right, I guess we'll give it one more night here, and if nothing happens, then we'll head on our way, which is, yeah. And so Golk, of course, kept on chiming in, saying, we could contact Nodens. And, yeah, so they eventually settled on, yeah, let's contact Nodens. You know, we need a big open area to do it, so there's a field right outside of the village. So tonight, we'll contact Nodens. And they discussed the question that they needed to ask him. They decided, you know, all the ritual said it would impart great knowledge. And so they were like, well, we don't know how this is going to work, but assuming he lets us ask him a question, we should think about that. And so they settled on, the question is, if there is a living member of the Carlisle expedition, where is the closest one located? It's a solid question. Alright, so some time went on. Reginald failed a pushed roll on speed reading the book, so he pretty much got a migraine and gave up on it. So Golk took it over and started reading through it. And Charlie, I think, went to the pub with Von Lyons and Alfred. And they were drinking, and they met their buddy, the crazy guy. They met the crazy guy there again, and so they talked to him about it. And he revealed a number of things to them. That the Vanes were secretive bastards, and most people say it was the boy, but it was really the girl. She's crazy. And they're like, how do you know it's the girl? And he's like, well, every month they go on a cycle and they go crazy. I've seen it. There's ramblings of a drunk man. And he's like, do you know what happened to the mother of the Vane family? He's like, it was Sir Arthur Vane. He strangled her. And so, you know, how do they discern what the hell is true and what's not? So they didn't put much hope in Cliff, the crazy guy. But he did also say that the Reverend was part of some golden druid order or something. And they were like, aha! So they went back to the Reverend, and Charlie went in there to kind of speak to him and ask him a few more questions. Again, failed more rolls, and so didn't get much out of him. And then asked him about this golden druid thing, and so the Reverend was, yes, I'm a corresponding secretary of the Order of the Golden Druid, or something like that, which was a society that he founded, or co-founded, while he was at Cambridge, and they catalog and collect artifacts from pre-Roman Britain. And they publish a quarterly journal, and it's all kind of very boring. And so that was pretty much all he got from the conversation. Again, he failed more rolls, but he did notice that there was a padlock on one of the drawers to the Reverend's desk. So he made a note of that. And then the other two left, and Charlie did confession. He confessed vaguely the kind of terrible stuff he's done in the last month or so. And so he got some sanity back for that, because apparently Charlie Chalk is a Christian, so confession, there you go. And so then we pretty much skip time ahead. We skip time ahead to about 10 o'clock-ish. And the group all headed out to this field, all except for Von Lyons, who hates cult shit. He doesn't want anything to do with it, and so he didn't prevent the group from doing it, but he just stayed in the pub. He's like, nope, I ain't doing that shit. And so the rest of the group headed out there, and they got in a circle in the field, and Golk started doing the incantation in a language none of them really understood. That wasn't French; it was some obscure language. did this incantation, and the wind started to grow. The wind started to blow a little bit harder. And while it's going on, they hear like a wolf howl in the distance. And it sounded like it was coming near the village, and they were like, Charlie was like, should we go help? Should we go check it out? Like, keep your concentration, this is more important. It was all about this ritual now. And so then they hear like rustling in the long grass nearby, and they're like, oh shit. And they can see like the waves of long grass just kind of weaving in the wind nearby. And so they have like their flashlights on it, and they got like their guns at the ready, and they're like, oh god. And they're debating whether to just open fire right away. And so it was a real tense moment for them, I think, because they like the wind is blowing and they can hear Gulk uttering this language that none of them know, and the leaves over there are rustling, and they're just like, And then it gets to like the edge of the long grass, and Charlie, I think, was really ready to shoot, but Reginald was like, stop. And then suddenly, what are you guys doing? As Cliff, the crazy drunk guy who wandered out there, just bursts out of the long grass. And so, I go, god damn. It was probably going to be Cliff either way, so if they had fired, they probably would have hit him, but I was debating, while I was describing the whole thing, I was debating, I was like, should I make this the werewolf, or should this be Cliff? Alright, it's Cliff. Anyways, so they're like, get out of here, Cliff, go rest in your bed, and get out, you're drunk. So, okay. And so as he's starting to walk away, Gulk finishes his incantation. Like, huh? As the wind blows really hard. He's like, what's that? And so he looks up, they all look up, and they see a little star in the night sky that appears to be getting bigger. Like, holy shit! Oh! And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it passes in front of the trees, and they can see it is not a star at all, it is a chariot. Oh, God. It worked! And so the chariot, which is like a half shell, apparently, comes rushing in and charging directly at the circle. It's like charging directly at Reginald. And Reginald's like, I'm going to hold the line. And so he he literally just stands there as the thing charges at him. Like, if there was a skill for big ball size, that he would have gone up a few points there. And so the chariot rushes right into him and passes through him and comes to a dead stop in the middle of the circle. And its driver is an old man with wild white hair. And he looks around the circle before stopping on Gulk. He says, I see you continue your tricks, you sniveling worm, and your games. But I see you mortals have a question. You may ask it. And so Charlie at this point is like, what? What? But Reginald just jumps right in. He's like, Nodens, if there is a living member of the Carlisle expedition, where is the closest one located? And Nodens responds, the closest living member of the Carlisle expedition is Miss Hypatia Celestine Masters, located at the Mountain of the Black Wind. I take my leave of you, and goes off into the night sky out of sight. And so they're just like, huh. But Charlie's like, what was that? Like, nobody's making a big deal out of this except Charlie. And so they start to discuss this, and they're like, did you hear what he said about Gulk? Gulk, what was that? And Gulk's just like, I never met him before. I don't know. And so Gulk was being, he never met him before. He's just Gulk. I don't know. And they got their answer from Nodens, but that wasn't really the topic they wanted to talk about. They wanted to talk about Gulk. So Gulk's just like, Charlie, you're the one that met him. I don't know. I could contact him again and ask him how he knows me. And they eventually decide, you know what, fine. Since he seems to be so confused by this, why don't we just contact him again and see what he knows? You're like, okay. Cliff had passed out drunk at this point. Partly drunk, partly shocked at what he had just seen. But nobody will believe him, so it's fine. And so CoC begins the incantation again. And he says the same incantation as far as the others can tell. Nothing different. And the wind grows even more violent this time. Angrily, the wind blows. And they see, yet again, the star come in. But it's going a bit faster this time as it rushes in. And Reginald's like, yeah, I'm not going to stand in place this time. And so he steps aside, and the chariot rushes into the middle of the circle. And Nodens is just he's got kind of his head down, he's just like... And so Charlie gets bold, and he's like, Nodens, and he points at CoC, who is this? And Nodens kind of like growls, and he's like, he is Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos, messenger of the outer gods and servant of Azathoth. I would flee from him as soon as you can. And he's gone. And so then it was a very chill moment as they're all just like... And Charlie says, can I roll psychology on Nodens? That is hilarious for two reasons. One, trying to roll psychology on a deity is pretty funny. Two, why the hell would he lie saying this guy is Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos? That was funny. But amidst that laughter, there was still this real tense moment. And so CoC is just kind of staring downwards. They can't really see his face. But the wind stops completely. No wind. And they're just like, oh shit, I start to run. And right before they start to run, they hear... I see that the game is up. Well, how about a new game? Let's play... Let's see how fast the puny humans can run. They're like, oh, fuck! And so they all start booking it. So, Alfred runs, Shinkatsu runs, Charlie Chak runs. Reginald does not run. He immediately just, like, gets down on his hands and knees and just, like, bows his head. He knows better than that. And so the other three all roll the dex times 5. They all failed. But Alfred critically failed. I'm like, no, there ain't much getting past that. And so the other two kind of stumble a little bit, but they keep going. Alfred trips and falls. And so as they look back, Charlie like looks back at him on the ground, and he sees just this knowledge of death in Alfred's face, in his eyes, and Alfred's just like, look under my mattress, before getting impaled by a giant blood-red spike that emanates out of the ground. And Alfred is dead. They lose some sanity for that. And so they just keep booking it, man. They're like, fuck this! And so CoC then turns to Reginald and he says, he's dropped the CoC voice at this point. He's like, yes, I see you are a brave one, Mr. Steinway. And so, they have a bit of a conversation where Reginald basically bargains for his life. And CoC, Nyarlathotep, accepts his bargain basically on the behalf that Reginald is going to continue acting for Nyarlathotep's amusement. And occasionally he might drop in to make things more amusing. It's pretty despairing, but Reginald agrees. And so Gulk snaps his fingers, and Reginald wakes up in his office at Steinway Hall. Alright, so Charlie deduces that Alfred was talking about his mattress at the bed and breakfast. And so he runs into the bed and breakfast and kicks open Alfred's door and sees Gulk sitting on the bed with a stack of papers in his hand. Looking for this? She's like, oh, fuck! And he's kind of speechless a little bit. And Gulk's like, so, Mr. Chuck, I heard that the Black Pharaoh made you ugly. And so Charlie just pulls out his gun and fires around. He misses, but Gulk continues. You know, I could make you handsome again, Mr. Chuck. I could make you the most handsome man in the world. And so Charlie hesitates. Well, how? And so Gulk lifts a finger and a mirror comes off the wall and floats in front of Charlie's face. And he sees that all the bandages and bandanas are gone. And there's the old Charlie Chuck. And he's like, What do you want for this? And his left arm disconnects completely and just drops to the floor as blood starts gushing out. I kind of forgot about the health loss. It should have been a major health loss, but he did lose 2 points of constitution permanently. And so Gulk's like, I'll be seeing ya! And he puts the stack of paper down and he disappears. And so at that point, I think he grabbed the stacks of paper. We'll say that he did. I'm not sure for certain. And he runs out with Shinkatsu, who is outside. They steal a car, and they just drive the hell out of there. They get pulled over by a cop who sees that Charlie's messed up, and the cop drives Charlie to a hospital. Meanwhile, Von Lyons is sitting at the pub. And in walks Gulk. And Gulk sits next to him. And Von Lyons acts very cold to Gulk and says, I don't know you. I don't want to hang out with you. You know, he says something about the cult or something like he doesn't trusting people or something like that. And Gulk's like, oh, because your family died, right? Just trying to push his buttons at this point. And so Von Lyons is like, what are you? Like, I'm Gulk. And at some point, Von Lyons is just like, give me the mask, Gulk. Gulk's like, okay. And he reaches into his pocket and, defying all known laws of physics, pulls out the entire mask of Hayam and he says, here you go. And then Von Lyons makes his big deal. Here it is. He's like, if you make me immortal, I will do anything you want, but as long as I have my head and my arms and my legs and I'm not messed up, but I'm immortal, I'll do anything you want. He's like, you promise? Yes, I promise. Okay. And boom! Von Lyons suddenly sees the planet Earth, kind of from a distance. And he sees the moon. And he's floating through space, naked and paralyzed. But he's breathing just fine. And that's his fate. He is immortal. He can never, ever die. But he is doomed for all eternity to float through space. And surprisingly, he was very okay with this. he was happy that he got this fate. No. He was like, well, after the first billion years of insanity, I think I'd eventually just be like, I don't think I'm insane. Like, no, this would be the worst, maybe not the worst existence, but it's gotta be up there. Never in any, no, nobody would want this. And he's trying to be like, well, eventually I'd run into like an asteroid or something like that. Like, no, Nyarlathotep will make absolutely certain, from now till the end of time, if there even is an end of time, that you never, ever escape this fate. He is omniscient and omnipresent, and he will make certain you are floating for all time. And roll a new character. Yeah, so he got his wish. He had all his body parts and he's immortal. That's pretty much all he said. The other thing was it was only because he mentioned he wanted all his body parts and all that. If he had just said, I want to be immortal, he would have basically made him like a planet in some galaxy. Like an immortal planet. That's probably defying physics as well, but fuck it doesn't matter. But yeah, so that's Von Lyons. He will exist for all eternity. So there you go. I had the perfect opportunity to completely kill Edward's character in any way I wanted, and I made him immortal instead. Boom. So. Alright. Yes. So. Oh boy. Yeah, I don't want to go into my kind of thoughts on this. I'll save that for secrets. But what else happened? Okay, so Shin then is sitting in the hospital room next to Charlie, who's sleeping. And Charlie was okay with this deal as well, because he'd rather have his looks than his arm, which personally I doubt it, because that is going to screw you at certain points. If they ever actually get into an action sequence, these things might hinder them. But yeah, for now he's fine with it. Anyways, so Shin's sitting there, and suddenly he hears behind him, "Hey!" And so Shin like swings around with his katana immediately, and of course it just passes right through Gulk. And Gulk offers him a deal then, because Shin got off kind of easy. Or so they were saying. I was like, no. You just wait. So Gulk's like, I understand that you're here to get money for your family. On the one hand, I could kill your family immediately and show you their dismembered corpses. On the other hand, I could make you the richest man in Japan. And of course, Gulk knows what he's going to pick. Like, how would you do that? Like, well, you just have to do something for me. Nothing you haven't done before, just a little murder. I want you to murder a man by the name of Inspector James Barrington. Tomorrow, in midday, by stabbing your katana through his heart. If you do that, I'll whisk you off to Japan and you can live a happy, meaningless, rich life. And so Shin thinks about it for a moment. He says, I'll do it, but I'll make my own way to Japan. Gulk's like, suit yourself, and he disappears. Made a deal with the devil, man. Reginald invokes the name of Gulk. And Gulk appears in his office. He props his feet up and he summons a bottle of perfect bourbon and just, yeah, whatever. And so Reginald starts speaking with Gulk about the events. And how did that conversation go? That was kind of a weird conversation. Basically, he asked about the other members of his group. And Gulk said, Alfred had an unfortunate end, but Von Lyons is taking the astral tour at this point. with like a little chuckle that amuses Nyarlathotep greatly. Charlie's a bit one-armed, or one-handed, one-sided maybe, but he's okay. And I'm speaking to Shin right now, because that was at the same time he was making the deal with Shin. And so Reginald is basically just be like, you know, I shouldn't be doing this, but it's either this or die horribly, so I'm going to keep going with this. So he agreed to just kind of keep this going, and Gulk basically is like, you better continue your investigation, otherwise I'm going to get bored. And you wouldn't like me when I'm bored. It's like the ultimate version of Gulk. And so Reginald was like, yeah, he's gonna keep investigating, and he's gonna keep his knowledge about. He's not gonna tell the others or any new people that come in that, hey, we're going after this thing, and oh, I know Nyarlathotep, he's a good buddy of mine. Let me summon him for you. He's not gonna do that because Gulk is basically just waiting for a new group to come in of all fresh people that don't know him, and he's just going to appear as Gulk. Jonah sent me. He's just going to do the same thing so he can do all sorts of more terrible shit. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, before Gulk left then, he's like, be sure to check out the Penhew Foundation, and he disappeared. Okay. So the night passes. And Charlie gets up, and he sees Shin still there, and Shin tells him about the deal that he just made. Like, I'm going to kill Inspector James Barrington. I'm going to be rich. And Charlie knows that Barrington is one of their leads. Like, he's an important guy that they need to talk to. He's like, you can't do that. He's a lead for this. You want me to just let my family die? And I was just like, oh man, this is perfect. I could save this for secrets, but I was thinking about having Shin, or Gulk tell Shin to kill Charlie and Reginald, but I was worried he'd be way too accepting of it, because he didn't really know him at all. He'd be like, oh, okay, go over to Reginald, hey, and he's like, okay. So I wanted to make it much more difficult for him than that. And I was like, oh, this is beautiful. This is way off script, by the way, if I might add. If you're not following too closely, none of this is in the campaign book. But I'm kind of making this thing my own, and I like that. So Shin's just like, I have to do what I have to do. And he leaves. And so Charlie gets a phone given to him, and he calls up Scotland Yard, and he talks to James Barrington. He's like, there's a Yakuza hitman coming, I think today, to kill you. And he succeeds on his persuade. He's like, just be cautious, man. Okay. Be wary of Asian men. And so Charlie did everything he could. And so here we introduce Ren's new character, the full name of which I cannot pronounce, but his first name is Sancho. And so it's Sancho de Guizero Primero something. I don't know. He's a luchador or whatever. He's a Spanish masked wrestler named Sancho. Yes. See, this is why Call of Cthulhu is awesome. I accept a character like that. That's fine. Because you're going to die anyways. So it's perfectly okay. We don't need ultra serious characters. Even though I'm running a bit more of... I'm not even sure if I'm... Well, I'm running a less campy, pulpy campaign, I guess. But I'm not running that serious of one. How could I be? So yeah. There's no need for ultra serious characters, because you're all going to die, so you might as well be crazy. Anyways, so Sancho he was a friend of Alfred's that Alfred had been in correspondence with, and so he's here to join up with Alfred to be part of this investigation. And so the first person he was going to go talk to, coincidentally, was Inspector James Barrington. So he's at Scotland Yard. He gets a meeting with James, and he sits down with him. This was actually really, really fucking useful. because this was a way to get information before Barrington dies. And so the interview with Barrington went pretty well. Sancho found out that Barrington had spoken with Jackson. Jackson was concerned about the Brotherhood of the Black Pharaoh, but Barrington had talked to Edward Gavigan, who denied any existence of that cult anymore. And one of the victims of the murders, who were all Egyptian, one of the victims cried out, "Hotep!" as he died. And apparently many of the victims frequented an Egyptian night spot in Soho called the Blue Pyramid. And that was pretty much all he wanted to tell the outsiders. So yeah, that was pretty much the extent of the interview. So as Sancho is leaving, he bumps into Shin Katsu, and he tries to be friendly to Shin Katsu, but Shin's just like, "No, get out of here." And so Sancho leaves. Shin tries to get a meeting with Barrington, but his secretary asks him that there's this Asian man here to speak with you, and Barrington is like, "What the fuck?" And so he's like, "No, don't send him in." And so the secretary says, "No. He's busy right now, I'm afraid." And so Shin runs out, grabs his katana from the trash can that he put it in, bursts back in, and he's like, "Tell me where Barrington is now." And so all the guys in there, and this is England, so none of them really carry guns. So they're all just like, "Slow down there, man. We don't need this." And so he saw where the secretary went to speak to Barrington, so he rushes over there, kicks the door in. Barrington's like, "What the?" He backs up into the corner. He's got his revolver on his hip, and as he's pulling it out, Shin rushes forward, slashes him across the chest with this deep gash. Barrington's like, "Ah!" He falls down to the ground. He fires off a shot, but it misses, and so Shin is just, "Ah!" And Inspector James Barrington of Scotland Yard is dead. Killing off leads. It's perfect. And so then Shin steps outside of the office, and he's met with 8 constables, all wielding nightsticks. Shin tries to make his way out, but he takes 28 points of damage and dies instantly. A fine red mist of Asian mess. Shinkatsu is dead. I hope you're keeping track. Oh, man. I said I was going to be more vicious, didn't I? Oh, man. That's crazy. Alright. So, yeah. How exciting. And so Sancho then pays a visit to Reginald, who was the other name on Alfred's list. And he speaks with Reginald, finds out that Alfred has passed, which upsets Sancho, but Sancho immediately joins the investigation as an enthusiastic member. And I don't remember how much information they really shared. It wasn't a great deal, but he was like, this investigation is some serious shit, man. And so Reginald's like, I have some paintings that you may want to look at in my apartment upstairs. I think you should take a look at them. We're like, oh God. So Sancho goes up, sees the 2 paintings, Miles Shipley paintings, loses sanity from both of them, fails both his sanity checks. So Reginald can see that he's kind of disturbed by what he saw, and so he's like, I know this is crazy. And Sancho is just like, no, this is evil! And he grabs one of the paintings and just starts shredding it in half. And Reginald's just like, oh! And so he grabs the other one off the wall, but he fumbles and it drops to the ground. And he's like, and so he grabs his pistol, and he doesn't point at it. He's like, points his eye. He's like, all right, Sancho, We don't need to do this. I know you're upset. Don't make me do this. I think Sancho could have torn Reginald in half, but eventually Sancho calmed down. He's like, this is evil, Mr. Steinway. Imagine that much more Hispanic and funny. This is evil, Mr. Steinway. And maybe racist, I'm sorry. Anyways, so he's like, I'll let you keep that painting, but never put it in front of me again. And Reginald's just so glad he's not about to tear apart his other, precious. He's like, okay, okay. And so Sancho leaves. And that's pretty much where we ended the session. Oh, God. Reginald was just so in shock at what happened. Oh, that's funny. But, yeah, that was a crazy session now. I didn't even need the campaign book for, like, that whole thing. I used it so little. So much was just off script. And so I kind of had to reel it back in a little bit by putting James Barrington in the spotlight and also having Golk mention the Penhew Foundation. I was like, all right, let's get this kind of back on track a little bit. But the campaign will never be the same from now on, I don't think. But yeah, that was weird. It was a hell of a lot of fun for me, but it was weird. So, the Secret to Mangging is going to be interesting because I'm going to talk about all the ramifications, and I'm going to talk about all the things that were going through my head during all those events. Man, that was a lot of impromptu decisions. So, yeah. So, we have 2 new people coming in next time. We had one person come in right at the end there, Sancho. We have one person who is lost an arm and is on he's basically a ragged shred of a man at this point, but he's still there. And then we have Reginald, who's basically made a pact with the devil at this point. So we'll see how far that road goes. But, yeah. Next week's going to be fun, too. It's always fun. This is the best campaign I've DM'd. I'm having a blast. I couldn't imagine stopping this campaign at this point. So, I hope it goes on for many sessions. But, like I said, we are in need of a 6th person. Yeah, I mean, it just kind of sucks. I love doing the Secret to Mangging, and that's really helpful to me. It's a lot of fun. It's great, but it means that I kind of imparted a lot of knowledge on the viewers. So, I guess if there's a remote chance that you have not watched any of the episodes and you want to play, please message me. Please be honest, though. Don't try to bullshit me. That's no good for anybody. Or if you might know somebody that has not watched any role Mangging and would be interested in playing, that'd be good too. I mean, we'll soldier on with 5 if we have to. I may have to bring Mert in too, that might work. But yeah, 6 is the optimal number for the campaign. But anyways, that's going to about wrap it up for me. Poor Golk. He just wanted to hang around and do some magic tricks. But, yeah, so my name is Mangg. This has been Role Mangging for our Call of Cthulhu campaign, and I'll see you fine folks next week.